Chi-Chi, it's nice to see you again.
Good to see you, too.
Even though I just saw you this morning. But I'm glad we have a second session together.
So am I.
So if this were ongoing treatment that we would be doing, I probably wouldn't have seen you for a week or so.
Right.
And the first thing I would do would be to do a mood check to see how you were feeling,
Okay.
especially compared to other weeks.
Okay.
And I'd find out what was important that happened between last session and this session that I should know about. You'd probably tell me some negative things, and then I'd ask you for positive things as well.
Okay.
And then the next thing we would do would be to to set the agenda. So that's where we'll start, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. That's fine.
So I had one idea in mind of something that might be important to talk about.
Okay.
But is there something in particular? We really covered the procrastination problem this morning, and we have a plan for dealing with that.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to make sure and talk about?
I did want to talk a little bit more about work, even though that is a similar problem.
Okay.
I do feel that my problems with procrastination and poor time management contribute to an unnecessarily high anxiety level at work. And I think that it's having a negative effect on my job performance, and I worry that, you know, every time, you know, something happens, you know, I immediately start this panicked thought of, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. So I think that's one thing I did want to talk a little bit more about. And then aside from that, I mean, whatever you think is...
Let me tell you my idea, and feel free to say, yes, that sounds good, or no, that sounds terrible, I don't want to talk about it. During the evaluation, there was one time when you got very teary, and that was when you started to think about a relationship, a 6-year relationship you had that ended about 15 years ago.
Right.
And it sounds as if you got help at the time, but that there were certain feelings that were so painful at the time that you didn't talk a whole lot about that relationship.
Right.
And I couldn't tell to what degree that's still distressing you, that breakup.
It goes back and forth. If I don't focus on it and don't think about it, then it's fine. And I think as time has gone on and the fact that I'm currently in a good relationship, I think that's made a big difference.
Do you feel that when it goes back and forth, especially the back part, I guess, that your reaction is stronger than one might expect after this period of time?
Yes, I do think so. I don't know why.
Well, that's why I was wondering whether it might be worth talking about that. So maybe you wouldn't have to have so much back and forth about it.
I'm not ready to do that yet.
Yeah. Thanks. So why don't we agree not to talk about it? But you know what? The other thing I was thinking that might be helpful is if we talked about your fears of talking about it.
Okay.
Is it all right if we spend maybe a couple minutes on that, and then you can decide whether you want to continue talking about it or not?
Sure.
So if you were to talk about it, what's the worst thing you're afraid would happen?
That I would be overwhelmed. And then I'd be stuck there.
I see.
I wouldn't be able to move past it.
And what does being stuck there mean?
Stuck in just this feeling of that I haven't been able to move on from my past.
Yeah.
That I haven't forgiven myself.
Oh. Okay.
For that mistake.
Yeah. So there are a couple parts to this. If you were to talk about it, you would get very emotional.
Yes.
And you're a little afraid that that emotion would just stick with you. And
yeah, and I also think that when I talk about anything that makes me emotional or teary, it's very hard for me to get past my initial feeling and talk about it in a rational way.
Right.
I find that happens a lot, and that has been an issue in relationships. I find it very difficult to talk to have a really serious conversation with somebody that I'm in a relationship with, even a friendship with, without getting carried away by emotion, whether it's anger or just getting teary or whatever. It's very hard for me to do that.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to talk about how I feel or what I want in a way that's just calm and rational.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but
Well, it's hard for a lot of people.
okay.
It sounds like it's not so much of an issue right now because Mike is away
Right,
for a while.
right, that kind of.
But when he comes back, might it be an issue again?
It's an yes, I think it is. I think it's an issue because we have very different styles of communicating, and I definitely think that there are things that we do need to talk about that that neither one of us has been able to really do. I mean, I don't know if is it a problem? Somehow we've managed to, I mean, we've been together 9 years, I think. And so obviously we must be able to communicate on some level.
Well, I was wondering whether you might want to just talk about this fear you have of experiencing negative emotion. We don't need to talk about the breakup.
Okay.
In fact, it might be more helpful to talk about it in the future when Mike comes and there are important things to talk to him about.
Right. I think that my fear is that I'm going to get so carried away by, and it's not just a fear, it does happen, that I get so carried away by my emotional reaction that I don't really end up saying what I want to say.
Yeah.
And then I get upset with the other person for not somehow magically understanding it without me having to say it. And I know that that's a problem. I know it's a problem. I know it's happened over and over. But I don't see a way out of it.
I see a way out of it.
Oh.
I see some things that I think could help.
Okay.
But I don't want to, if you want to talk about the anxiety at work.
No, this is interesting.
This feels like a little bit more central.
This is interesting, and
And if we have time, we can try to save a couple minutes at the end for the anxiety at work.
Okay.
So we can either talk about something that you have tried to bring up in the past, or we could talk about something that you could imagine you will want to bring up in the future.
Right.
Which do you think would be more helpful?
Let me think for a minute. I guess we could talk about we could talk about something that's ongoing, I guess.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, occasionally Mike will talk about our future together, and he'll say that he wants us to get married or live together or any of those things. And then we'll talk about it, and it seems to be a good conversation. But then the next time that I bring it up or want to say something about it, it's like we never had that previous conversation. It's gone. And so it seems like it's almost like he's responding to some sentimental feeling or some romantic feeling, and he talks about this stuff, but then when I want to talk about it and want to really pin him down, it's like it never happened.
What does he say?
He just says, we'll talk about that later. And so that's one thing. I also feel like I haven't really conveyed to him what some of my concerns are with. I feel like he'll talk about things that he wants to see happen and is completely ignoring what I'm saying. One of the big issues that we had in the past, I think it's not going to be an issue now just because of biology, is he would sometimes say that he wanted to have children and he wanted us to have children. And he would, he's a very methodical, logical person, and he would sit there with this very long methodical list and go through it, and I would be responding very emotionally trying to
Right.
get him to see my point of view.
Right.
And I would feel like he just did not hear a word I was saying.
Yeah.
That he would just keep on with his list and just talking right over me while I was just screaming at him. And so I still feel like that these issues are unresolved. And I still sometimes wonder, like, does he still think that we're going to have a child? And if so, why does he think that? And every once in a while he'll say something that indicates that he does, and I go, but again, when I try to pin him down, he just skitters away. So it feels like there's these kind of big, important issues out there that couples need to figure out that we haven't. And so I think that's, that's frustrating.
Can you wait till the next time you see him in person to have a conversation with him about these things?
Yes, yeah.
And you think that would be better than on the phone?
I think so.
You know, the phone is awful hard because you can't get the nonverbal feedback.
No, you really can't.
You
really can't. And it's.
Yeah.
And we do video conferencing, but that's not the same
exactly
either.
The same,
it's not quite the same.
And when do you see him again?
In 2 weeks.
Oh, he's coming very soon.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this may be apropos to that time.
Yeah.
So what would you like to say to him?
I would like to say, I have tried to tell you that this idea of yours it's not going to happen, and I've tried to convey that to you, and you keep coming back at me with this, methodical list of reasons why it should happen, why it can happen, and you've never heard my point of view. Or if you have, you've pretended that you didn't because it doesn't coincide with your point of view, and because if we can't agree on this, then we probably can't be together. And I actually have told him that. And he just got very upset and was like, well, that's an extreme reaction. But I think he thinks that he can win me over by using logic and,
Persistence.
Persistence, yes. And he just is not getting it.
Now, I wonder whether there might be another way to approach him. If you were to say something like, Mike, I have something to talk to you about that really makes me upset, but I'm going to try to talk about it in a way so that I don't get so upset. Is it all right if is this an okay time for me to talk to you about this? So you give him a little bit of the control over the time.
Right.
And then he'll probably say, well, what's it about? And you'll say it's about having children. And then he might say, well, I don't want to talk about it now.
Yeah, that's probably what he'll say.
And you might say, well, let's set a time then before you go back, because we only have.
We'll only have a few days. We'll have about a week.
A week together. So you might want to bring this up, fairly soon to the beginning.
Yeah.
So maybe you could set a time if he doesn't want to talk about it right then. And it might be a good idea to do this when you're out at Starbucks or someplace having coffee or something.
Right.
And then you might, the way that you presented it before is certainly a reasonable way to present it. Except that you come across as a little bit angry and critical of him. So just another way of approaching him might be to say, I'm really confused. Because it's obvious to me that you've wanted a kid, or you've had positive feelings about having a kid for a number of years, and I haven't wanted to. And I thought that I had made that really clear, but I'm confused as to what's in your mind and whether that's still something that you think is going to happen. And then, how do you think he would react if you said it that way?
I think he would probably say, he would say, what are your reasons for that you think that you don't want to have a child? Or that you don't think you can have a child.
Mike, I'm a little confused because I feel like I've gone through all of the reasons before, and I feel like you think, gee, if I can't, Chi-Chi can't make a case for this, then we'll have a child.
Right.
And I have to tell you, just in my heart of hearts, I love you, Mike, and I want to stay with you, Mike, but I just don't think it's a good idea for us to have kids. And you're just not going to win me over.
Right.
And then what do you say to that?
What do you say? I don't know. He would probably say, he would probably say, well, let me hear all of the objections and I will provide a solution for each of those objections. That's his way.
Yeah.
If you say, you know, I don't want something, I don't like something,
yeah.
you know, his way is to say, well, you know, give me all of your objections and I will come up with a solution for each one.
And out of role play, Chi Chi, do you feel like you've already done that?
Yes.
And there's just no way he's going to...
No.
And so then I think you have to say, Mike, just any amount of logic
Right.
isn't going to change my mind on this.
Right.
I'm really sorry. I mean, I wish I could go along with you. I can
Right.
see that this is really important to you, and you know I like to make you happy, and I
Right.
wish I could do this for you. But
That would be a good way to
but I
phrase
really
it.
can't.
Yeah, I think that would be a more constructive way to phrase it than what I have been doing, which is to, you're not listening to me. But
And what do you think he would say?
I think then he would probably hear it, and he would. I think he would hear that, and he would understand that to some level. I don't know what he would do after that. I don't know. Part of my frustration with it is that I think that he has been in long-term relationships in the past. He had 2 long-term relationships before me. My feeling is that people who want to have children do that, they know that, and they do that pretty early in their life. So why didn't that happen with those? Well, in fact, I know in one case, it was the woman who wanted to get married and have children, and he didn't.
And he didn't.
So part of me wonders how much he really does want this.
Yeah.
Because I think people who do want children know it early, and they plan their lives that way.
That may be, or for any reason, but in any case,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how relevant that is
Okay.
if this is something that's so strong inside of you.
Okay.
Now, are you fearful that he may want to break up with you?
I am.
And would you tell him that? Mike, I'm really afraid you're now going to want to break up with me. Then what would he say?
I don't know.
So we ought to think about whether or not you even want to have this conversation then. Because there is a risk to the conversation.
There's a very big risk.
Yeah.
There's a very big risk. I don't think he would.
But he might need to think about it.
But he might need to think about it. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't, but you never know.
You don't know. So maybe we should talk about whether you want to have this conversation or not.
I think we have to have it because we've had all these years, you know, together. And are we going to go along another, 8, 9 years without this being resolved?
Right. So you think you are better off just knowing one way or the other?
Yeah, I do. And I think that, and I think he needs to know. I think he needs to know because if it does mean that much to him, then he does need to, find someone that will do that.
He should actually have a rent-a-child for a little while, I think.
Before he makes that decision.
Yeah, but anyway, it's not under your control.
That part of it is out of my control.
I think we need to talk about if you have this conversation and if he decides to move on, what can you do to move on? Better, perhaps, than you were able to 15 years ago.
I don't know. That's going to be really tough.
Yeah.
It's going to be really tough.
Are you in the same position in life as you were 15 years ago?
No, I think I'm in a much better position in life.
What's better now?
I'm more financially stable. Yeah. I'm more, I've learned to be more independent. I've learned to be more self-sufficient. So I think I'm better in that sense.
Yeah.
Just older and wiser.
Yeah.
I know that it wouldn't kill me,
yeah.
But...
Are you afraid of that negative emotion you'll feel if it happens?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty bad.
Yeah. Do you have a picture in your mind of what it might look like if it's really bad?
I think it's going to be pretty devastating.
Do you see yourself someplace?
it's hard to even picture it. It's at that point, I don't know. I don't know if it would be. It wouldn't, like I said, it wouldn't kill me, but it would be. It would be very tough. It would be very tough.
When would it be the toughest?
When? Having to go through the day, go to work, pretend that everything's normal.
Yeah. And would there be anyone at work you could confide in?
There are a couple people I could confide in.
That make it better or worse?
A couple of colleagues. I think that would help. I think that would help at least, at least to sort of say, I might be a little strained. I mean, maybe work would be a good place to take my mind off it.
A distraction.
A distraction. It might be it might be good that way. I have. I certainly have friends that I could, get to distract me, as it were.
And to give you some support.
Yes, emotional support.
Really
just,
important.
yeah. So I think in that sense, I would have more of a support network than I did before. I think, I don't know. I always say that if anything happens with me and Mike, that I'll never be in another relationship again. Mm-hmm. So maybe that would be the way that I would handle it.
Well, what do you think about that? Do you think that's true, that you'd never be in another relationship again?
It would be really hard. It would be really hard to start over.
Yeah. It would be hard. There's no question about it.
Yeah. I don't know if it would be worth it.
Well, it wouldn't be worth it if you never found somebody.
Well.
Probably would be worth it if you did find somebody.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it would be a lot of effort for a slim to little payoff. So.
Why do you think the payoff would be slim?
I think it's hard to find a good relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think it takes a lot of work when you're single to find somebody good, and especially as you get older. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't want to go through all this again.
I mean, getting more intimate, getting closer, and then getting hurt again.
Right.
Yeah. No,
right.
Of course you wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
But do you think, especially if you perhaps were seeing a therapist, that would make it easier for you to do that?
Yes, I think so.
Might that be something you would plan to do?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I would probably have to. I would probably have to have one lined up just in case. Just in case.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And you'd have your cats.
Of course.
Your cats are important.
Of course, they're very, very important to me. And.
You might have your writing. Who knows? Maybe you do.
I might have all kinds of things that could be a good substitute.
How long do you think it would be before you kind of had your sense of equilibrium back?
Well, even in the past, when I've had really bad breakups, I think I always spent. It's hard for me to remember, but it seems to me, looking back, that I always spent a short time of feeling just absolutely terrible and just wanting to die, and then, but that feeling passed pretty quickly, and then, you have to move on. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Maybe you find a Mike-like person who either has kids, or they're grown, or doesn't want kids.
Right.
Whatever.
It's possible. Yes. Yeah. Or he could decide that,
he wants to stay.
That he wants to stay.
Yeah.
Any of those things are possible. But I feel like, I've had very bad judgment about men always. So I feel like even just being able to find Mike was such a stroke of luck for me that I don't see that repeating again.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, what was it that drew you to Mike?
We started off as friends, and he was completely different from anyone else I'd ever been with. And in fact, I remember saying that to a friend of mine, and she said, her response was, "I like him already."
Oh, nice. So she recognized how important that was. So something changed in you. You saw something different in him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And apparently you must had some kind of equation like this, even without your friend telling you, but this new thing is good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
are you afraid you'll just lose that judgment?
Well, I don't know. I mean, how come I never had it be, I don't know what changed to make it. I'm not sure what that.
Well, it sounds like to me that Mike is different from the other guys. And so in what ways is he different?
He's very, being in a relationship with him is very, it's very calm, it's soothing, it's, I mean, that sounds boring, but it's not.
No, I understand.
He's reliable, he's predictable in some ways, he's serious, he's a very, he's very caring in a he's actively caring. Like I said, he's the type that if you have a problem, he will figure out some way to fix it, whatever it is.
Are you thinking you would not pick this up about another guy?
I don't know.
You'd not be able to tell whether another guy was calm, soothing, reliable, predictable, actively caring?
I don't know. I never did before. All my past relationships tended to be pretty chaotic.
Yeah.
Guys that were kind of wild and cheated on me and were, drank too much and couldn't hold down a job. All those.
Are you giving yourself enough credit here, Chi-Chi? You think you wouldn't tell the difference between calm, soothing, reliable, predictable, and wild, cheating type drinks too much?
I think I would tell the.
I think you would tell the difference too.
But I'm afraid that somehow whatever was working at that point.
Well, do you have a safety net? Someone you could bounce this guy off of?
Probably. Yeah. Oh yeah. Sure.
Like who?
Friends.
Friends. Or if you're seeing a therapist.
Or a therapist. Yeah.
Yeah. So you wouldn't have to 100% rely on yourself.
Right.
No, my guess is you've probably developed this gut sense now.
Maybe. It took me a long time, though.
It did take you a long time. But sometimes once you get that learning, it just takes hold.
It's true. I mean, sometimes I think, sometimes I think about Mike and I think, God, I could never go back to those bad guys again after this. I would never tolerate it,
Chi-Chi, we've just talked about so many important things.
I know.
No, I just think we should probably get some of them down in writing.
Okay,
do you want to write or you want me to?
Whatever you think is better.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Or we could both do it if you want. Doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Okay.
So let's see. Do you want to just start or do you want me to ask you a question to start?
If you can start.
Okay. So we talked about having a discussion with Mike. And so do you want to write down something about what that discussion should look like?
Yeah, that would help me, I think. Yeah.
What should we say?
I'm trying to remember how we had phrased it. Setting up a time to talk.
Yeah.
Because almost guaranteed he'll say, this is not a good time.
Yeah.
So making sure that we set aside a time to talk. I would probably have to let him know that it won't be, a long, drawn-out period of time.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good. So I wanted something to talk. Maybe we could talk for about 20 minutes about it or something like that.
That it won't be long, drawn out.
Now, I don't know if this helps, but I'd use the word confused. I'm confused, Mike.
I think that would be a good way to phrase it.
Confused.
Because then it's not like I'm saying that I'm angry or I'm hurt or just confused.
And another thing we talked about was saying, I'm so sorry that we want two different things here.
Right.
And then, I would give it to you if I could.
And I would. I mean,
Yeah. And we talked about if he insists of saying, again, I'm confused, we've already been through this isn't
Right.
going to work.
Right.
I imagine if he keeps on insisting that you may have to go along with him and say, okay, I'm willing to do this one last time.
Right.
And then at the end, I have to tell you what my conclusion is.
Yeah.
Insists, confused, we've been through this. But compromise if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
One last time.
Right.
Is there anything else that you want to have in this conversation with Mike?
That I think that's, that I do want to stay with him.
Absolutely.
But that this is just not something that I can do.
Yeah.
If there were any way to do it, I would, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I hope I can do all this without.
Well, then, if you think you can't, then I think you have to say to him, I'm going to try to do this without crying. I'm going to try my hardest. I know it's really important to you that I not cry. If he's like most men, he's
Right.
going to say, but I might, but I'm going to try to, I
Right.
want you to know that I'm going to try to control it as much as I
Right.
can.
Right.
Okay. I think most women would find it extremely difficult to have this conversation without crying, so you're in good company, Chi-Chi, if you cry. Then the next thing we talked about is if he breaks up, if he
Right.
decides to break up with you. So if we break up, and what do you think would be important for you to remember?
That I have a support system, that I can get through it.
Yeah.
That I'll have to slash his tires on his car. No!
You could just key it. Key. Get through it. Another thing we talked about was that the intense emotion is short term.
Right. Right. As I recall, people who were there with me might remember it differently.
Well, usually it
but
kind of
that's- Right.
comes and goes, but most of us can't maintain emotional
No.
intensity for
Right.
a long period of time. We said that work could be a distraction.
Friends, therapy.
Yep. Friends, therapy. And we also talked, if we break up, that you'd have a choice then, that you might at some point find somebody else.
Yeah. I can't really think about that part of it.
So maybe we should say something like, could talk to a therapist
Yeah.
about a new relationship. Doesn't mean that you're obligated to.
Right.
But we also talked about how your judgment is much different from how it used to be.
I hope so.
I better put judgment maybe.
Maybe better than it used to be.
Maybe better. I don't think you had a role model like Mike before to compare guys to, or did you? I don't know.
My father is somewhat similar, was somewhat similar.
Although usually you don't want to compare our
I
relationships
know.
to dads.
Yeah, I know. That sounds creepy, right? But
No, if it works, it works. That's fine. That's fine. But it's a natural thing that, not to gravitate toward
Right.
initially.
Right.
So judgment may be better and can get, I'm going to say, advice from friends.
Therapist.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. So.
We also, one of the things we started to talk about a little bit is too that you could enrich your life in other ways.
Yes, that's, yeah.
In fact, the other ways that we were talked about this morning.
That we already talked about, right.
We talked about this morning.
And I think that makes a big difference also.
Yeah.
Because those would be distractions, but healthy distractions as opposed to, some of the others.
Did you want to talk about this anymore? Or we have a couple minutes left to talk about work. If
Whatever
you'd
you
rather.
think is there.
I don't know, do you have your sense? What's your gut say about it?
I feel like this has been a very good, I think I think we've handled this one for now in a good way.
Maybe
in
we
a good
could
way.
talk about work and apply some of the things that we talked about here to work.
Right.
Okay. So a typical situation is you're at work, and then what makes you have the thought, what if I lose my job?
If I feel like there's something coming up, something I have to have done that I'm behind on, and I'm scrambling and scrambling to get it done, and my boss is asking me when I think I'm going to have it done, and I always do get it finished, but in doing so, I've created all this anxiety for myself, and I feel like I'm in a panic state, and I feel like I'm forgetting some important piece of it.
Yeah.
So I seem like I just caused myself all this unnecessary panic and worry, and we have had layoffs at work. So, everyone is just kind of hanging on.
Yeah.
And
okay, so the first thing I want to point out to you is the reason that you feel anxious is because of what's going through your mind. You could have the same situation at work, behind, scrambling, bosses asking me when you're going to get the project done. And if you had the thought, well, he's a little anxious himself, but I've always gotten, or she, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I've always gotten my projects done in the past. Even if I screw up this one, so it's 1 out of 50, then I haven't gotten done, I'll probably be okay. If you had those thoughts, then what would your anxiety be like?
It would be a lot less.
Be a lot less.
Yeah.
So our emotions are influenced by what we think, by our perception of the situation. And when we're anxious, sometimes our thinking is realistic, and sometimes it's not.
Okay.
So one of the questions, I'm going to teach you 2 sets of questions. Okay. One set of questions has to do with just looking for the validity of your thoughts. So what's the evidence that if you don't meet a deadline, that you would lose your job? Is there some evidence? Has your boss said things before?
Not so much about that, but no, I mean, let me think. My boss, I have 2 bosses, and the big boss, I guess. Yeah. I know it's frustrating to her that she's an extremely organized person, right. Very orderly, very organized, very that way. And I know it's frustrating to her that I'm not.
Right.
There's someone else in the office that's the same way, and I know she feels that way about both of us.
Yeah.
And, she wants things done a certain way, which I understand. But I always feel like when she expresses her frustration with me about those things, she doesn't do it she doesn't get angry, she doesn't yell or scream. She presents it in a way that she wants me to be better, and
she's not happy about it.
She's not happy about it.
Yeah. Now, would the unhappiness go to the extreme of firing you, do you think?
I think if it kept up, I think it would be, I would have to screw up pretty badly.
Yeah.
To get fired.
And when you're at work and you're behind and you're scrambling, would this be a major screw up?
No. I mean, as long as I get it done and get it done properly and on by the deadline, no.
And well, what if it wasn't by the deadline?
Then that would be a pretty big screw up.
And she would fire you then?
No, I would probably get a warning or be put on probation or something like that.
Right. In which case, you could use the skills we talked about this morning to get yourself to beat the deadlines better.
Yes, exactly.
You know what we didn't talk about it. In fact, what just as an aside, a problem-solving thing might be to set yourself earlier deadlines than your actual deadlines.
Yeah.
So that may help.
Okay.
Okay. So you screw up badly once. Chances are she wouldn't fire you, but she wouldn't be happy about it. Is there any evidence on the other side that you could screw up and not get fired?
Yeah, I think.
Have other people screwed up? Have you screwed up
Yeah,
and not
yeah.
gotten fired?
I mean, yeah, definitely there are. Yeah, this other woman in the office that I was talking about, she was telling me that she was worried about her evaluation that's coming up because even though she does a really good job, she can never get to work on time. She's always like an hour late.
Yeah.
And she said, our boss, she said she keeps bringing this up every time we have an evaluation, and she keeps saying, "Can you please just get here?"
But she's never
on
gotten
time."
fired for it.
But she's never gotten fired for it.
Yeah. So maybe there's a little more leeway.
There might be a little more than I think. Yeah.
The other thing to remember, I think, is that you're a known quantity to your boss.
Right.
And anyone that she would have to hire would not be a known quantity unless it's somebody
that she knows.
She knows, or
right.
raising within the organization. And if she likes things neat and orderly, she might not like starting over with somebody
new. Well, that's true.
Okay. So the first question when you're making a negative prediction like that is, what's the evidence that this thought is true? And is there any evidence on the other side that maybe it's not true?
Right.
Then the second set of questions are what we call the decatastrophizing questions, making things less of a catastrophe. So if the worst happened and you lost your job, how would you cope with that?
I would take all the practical steps of making sure that I got unemployment and my insurance continued and so on. Yeah. I've been fired from jobs, so I know.
And you found other jobs.
So I know what to do.
Okay. So that's a known quantity too.
That's a known quantities, yeah.
So you'd be able to cope. You know the steps.
Yeah, this economy is a lot tougher.
It is.
And
so it
I'm
might
older,
take longer.
And and I'm older, so I can't be quite that cavalier about it.
But you'd survive.
Somehow I would.
In the probably unlikely chance that you got
Somehow
fired.
I would.
But so that's the worst, and usually our minds gravitate toward the worst.
Yeah.
What's the best that could happen in this situation?
I could use my set of steps that we worked out here and do such a great job that my boss would be amazed at how much better I was doing.
Either that or that you'd get a new job that you liked even better.
That would be
either one of those would be the best. And what do you think is the most realistic outcome?
Probably the first one. I think getting another job would be...
I'm sorry, just the whole most realistic outcome if you're at work, you're behind and you're scrambling.
Oh.
What's the most realistic outcome? That you would get it done in time?
That I would get it done on time. And that I would be safe another day, I guess.
You'd be safe another day, or another year.
Or another month, or whatever, yeah.
So when you're feeling really anxious, you want to look for these negative predictions that you're making. And you want to ask yourself, well, what's the evidence that this negative prediction is likely to come true?
Right.
Is there any evidence on the other side that maybe it's not likely to come true? And then ask yourself, okay, if it did come true, if the worst did happen, how would I cope?
Right.
But that's just the worst outcome. What's the best thing that could happen in this situation? And then what's the most realistic outcome? And I think if you practice this, you may need a little help with a therapist, or you may be able to do it on your own, then I think you'll find that your anxiety starts to come down.
Right, right.
And we use similar questions actually with Mike. What's the evidence that he would leave you or not leave you? What's the evidence that you would or wouldn't be able to find somebody else? If the worst happened, how would you cope? What's the best and the most realistic scenarios?
That's true. I hadn't, but
So these questions work for any sense of anxiety.
That's really interesting. It's,
So what did you think about our second session together?
I thought it was really good. I mean, I feel like I liked the ability to talk about things that are very deeply emotional and upsetting, but in a way that it seems like this way that you have of breaking things down is it makes everything seem smaller and much more manageable than it is.
That's exactly right. That's what we aim for.
Because it feels, I felt like I came in the first session also with, just these enormous things that were just so huge and blocking, and that after talking with you, it's like, well, those are not really big deals. What's the big deal?
Well, they're
And-
big deals unless you have the tools for them.
Right.
Like the
yeah.
rubbing alcohol for the ink on
Right,
fingers, right?
right. It would be a big deal for you to have that stain on your hand all day,
That's
but
right.
no, you don't
But once
have
you
to.
have the right tools.
Right.
And so here are just a couple of tools we went over
They
today.
just seem like they're so much more manageable and small and not, and also that they're not the center of my life. That that there are other important things going on. That
Would you feel like you have more going for you?
Yeah,
In a
that I'm
way.
not such a big loser.
No, of course not. Of course not. Oh, another one of those automatic thoughts.
Right.
What's the evidence for that? There's a lot of evidence against that.
Right.
Kiki, I'm so glad we had the chance
I'm
to
so
talk.
glad also. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you so much.